Mets general manager Billy Eppler was active on the phones this weekend. There was a potential trade that could have made Eric Hosmer a Met, as well as Chris Paddack, with Dominic Smith heading back to San Diego. Luckily, that one never happened. The Mets did make a trade, acquiring a left-handed reliever in Joely Rodriguez, but they traded a reliever with a lot of promise in Miguel Castro. What do we make of that deal and the deal that did not ultimately come together? I'm going to break down all of that on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. And speaking of Just Baseball, I think we all should thank Javi Reyes, host of Locked On Padres, who also writes for Just Baseball. And I was just looking at the website yesterday. It was, I don't know, about 3 o'clock, and I see an article titled Eric Hosmer traded to the Mets, a breakdown of what it means, or something along those lines. And Javi Reyes did a great job reverse jinxing that trade. Me and him were texting back and forth all day, talking about the prospect of doing a crossover show to talk about this strange trade. And he put it into the ether by starting an article before the trade happens. It's sort of like my days when I used to write for Mets Mirage. If I had to write a game recap, I would never start writing Mets win, because you know that you might jinx yourself and that win might not come together. Same thing happens for this trade. If any of you have ever listened to Locked On Padres, you know Javi doesn't even refer to Eric Hosmer by his actual name. That's how much he does not like seeing this guy out there on that big contract. And there was a glimmer of hope for him, and he jumped the gun a bit. So thank you, Javi, because that trade was something I did not want to see come together. If you were not on social media or watching SNY, hearing all the news throughout Saturday, here is what the framework of the deal was. Dominic Smith goes to the Padres in this would-be trade. Chris Paddack, if you remember, the former, rookie of the year hopeful in 2019, who was going head-to-head with Pete Alonso, he would have come back to the Mets in this trade along with Emilio Pagan, a reliever, and Eric Hosmer, and also a boatload of cash, as the Padres would have eaten up to $35 million of his contract to bring his average annual value down to just over $6 million. Now, that was originally the framework that we learned, that the Mets would also maybe be shipping Hosmer to a third team, so he would never actually be a Met, which made me like that trade a little bit more. And I was able throughout the day to start to wrap my head around it. I didn't want the trade to happen, but if it did happen, I would come to terms with the fact that this would be the best thing for Dominic Smith's career, and also that Chris Paddack is a worthy pitcher that you could reclaim, a real project at this stage of his career. Because you look at what Eric Hosmer has done over the last 2 years, he has not been good. In his rookie season, a 3.33 ERA, 0.98 whip, looks like a up-and-coming potential frontline starter for that Padres team. But then in 2020, he pitched to a 4.73 ERA, and last year, a 5.07 ERA. And you look at his fastball, Paddack just gets lit up. He throws that pitch. It's just on a clothesline for hitters. It's right there for them. A 658 slugging percentage against the pitch in 2020, 531 against it last year. He has a good changeup, a really good changeup actually, and his curveball is decent, and the fastball does come in at 95. So again, as a reclamation project, sure. At the same time, though, this is a pitcher that received an injection in his elbow last September for a partially torn UCL. So there is a huge injury risk. And again, the numbers haven't been great. So sure, he'd have a starter under control for maybe 3 more years, but even the Mets were saying he would slot in behind McGill. So he might not even be in the opening day rotation, assuming Max Scherzer, who's dealing with a strained hamstring, if that injury proves to be worse than it is, because right now he's just day to day, maybe you could have seen a Chris Paddack in the Mets opening day rotation. But I look at Trevor Williams, who we'll talk about a little bit more later, and I like Trevor Williams as depth just as much as I would like a Chris Paddack. So this idea of giving up Dominic Smith in a deal for Chris Paddack being the headline, it just wasn't enough for me. You throw in the fact that Emilio Pagan is a decent reliever, but not one that I think really moves the needle. He had a 4.75 ERA the last 2 years with the Padres, was really great with the Rays in 2019, but that is the Rays. So do the Mets have the ability to get the most out of him the way Tampa did? That is something we don't know. Again, almost another project. And Hosmer's bad. So assuming Hosmer went to another team, that's great, but you'd still be paying some of that salary likely. It's just not a good trade, or it wouldn't have been a good trade. I'm glad they didn't do it. You have to remember Dominic Smith in 2019 and 2020, he showed his potential. He showed what he could be. And that was across that 2-year span, about 400 plate appearances, 396, 21 home runs, 31 doubles, 67 RBIs, 299 batting average, a 366 on base percentage, a 571 slugging percentage, a 150 WRC plus, which again measures hitters based on a league average of 100, 50% better than your league average hitter. Even if Dom isn't that, if he is somewhere between that and what he was last year, this is an above average bat in the Mets lineup. And I'm not giving that up for a pitcher that, if everyone's healthy, isn't even cracking my rotation. I would be hesitant to do a Chris Paddack, Dominic Smith trade straight up. That's just how much I value Dom. I think there's better players out there that you could get for Dominic Smith, whether that's now on the block, whether that's mid-season at the trade deadline, or even next off season. So I'm not trading him when his value's at its lowest, especially as good as he's looked in camp. Because to me, Dominic Smith should be this team's designated hitter. And with that, I don't see the value in making this trade. I'm glad the Mets came to their senses. And the one thing that did come out is that Dominic Smith would have welcomed the trade. And so now there's going to be Mets fans out there who are sour on Dominic Smith because of that. And for those of you who may be listening to this that think that Dom should be moved now, he needs to be gone, he can't fit into this team anymore because of what he said. No. Okay, take a deep breath, relax a little bit, think about it, think it through. You don't just trade a player because they want to be traded. And Dominic Smith wasn't requesting a trade. He said he would welcome this trade. Let's think about that for a second. Dominic Smith would welcome a trade to get a role on a team where he has to play every day, where that's not clear on the Mets. This is a guy who is getting closer and closer to free agency. He wants to prove himself. He wants to establish himself. He wants to be a starter, and he deserves that right. That's why I think he should be the Mets DH. But I'm not just going to move him, for the best, thing for his career. If you're the Mets, you still have to do what's best for your franchise, and that's keeping Dominic Smith right now. And for Dom, look, it would have been the perfect fit for him. Okay, he's a California native. His high school is a 2-hour drive from San Diego. I mean, this is a kid that was supposed to go to USC if he didn't get drafted. He is from Cali. He could live in Cali. He could play on a great team. He could play every day with the Padres. It would have been a great situation for him. And also, when your name is constantly on the block, there is an emotional toll that puts on a player. You want to know that you're in a good place, that you are secure with your standing in an organization. But you also have to understand the business side of things. The fact that there is interest from you or for you from other teams, that just shows that you are a player that is respected in the league. And Buck Showalter said something to that effect. It's better to be wanted by other teams than not wanted at all. And I think because the Mets have Buck Showalter, it allows you to go through this type of a day on Saturday and not let it affect the team moving forward. Because Buck Showalter is going to be able to put his arm around Dom, get him in the right headspace, and get him to the point where he can thrive in his role. And if Dominic Smith thrives in his role, not only will he get more opportunities with the Mets, but that'll also open more doors in the future for him to go to other teams and eventually be that guy somewhere where he can play every day. And hopefully by 2023, Dominic Smith will be the starting first baseman for another team. I really do think that for his career, that is something that I want to see happen even. But for this season at this time, it's just not the right point where I would trade him because his value to the Mets is still much greater than it is on the market. If all you're going to get for Dominic Smith is you have to take on a terrible contract with Hosmer, and you have to get 2 projects when it comes to Chris Paddack and Emilio Pagan. Just not worth it. With that said, though, this did tell us a lot about where things stand with the Mets. They still want starter depth, and they're willing to trade Dominic Smith. So I want to explore those things a little bit more in the next segment here. What is Dom's role with this team, and where do they stand with starter depth? And then we'll close the show today talking about the trade that Billy Eppler did make to address their bullpen by adding another left-handed arm. Before we get to that, though, BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including this week's Master Championship odds, podcasts, and reviews for all of the different leagues this season. Last Thursday, I did a Mets betting preview. You should watch that. Give you all of the different props they have at BetOnline, the futures bets, the things you want to look at when it comes to this Mets team. BetOnline is your continuous source for all of your upcoming sports wagering information needs, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so when it comes to trading Dominic Smith, I just want to focus back in on what his role is on this team. Because right now, if it was my decision, if I was writing the lineup card, he'd be the DH at opening day. Now, because Robinson Cano maybe has a certain stature, because Robinson Cano just had a 4-hit game in the spring training and looks really good right now, I could see the Mets going with Cano on opening day at DH, but there's going to be enough at-bats that go around. Jose Peraza got over 100 plate appearances last year. There are at-bats to be had. Brandon Drury, I believe, also was over 100 last season. So now you have a guy in Robinson Cano who is getting paid a lot of money, but on a Steve Cohen Mets team, that does not matter. There are better options right now to deal with every single injury or hiccup that's going to come out throughout the season. So right now, you look at this Mets team, and the outfield looks great. I've talked about it. It's the best outfield in this division last week. Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Mark Canha. If any of them go down, Dominic Smith is starting in left field. And if not him, it's Jeff McNeil starting in left field. Robinson Cano may be starting at second base, and Dominic Smith is getting the at-bats at DH. So any of those injuries, and he is right into the everyday lineup, right into that everyday role he wants. Now you look at what else you have, right? Let's just say that Eduardo Escobar, Jeff McNeil goes down. Well, Robinson Cano provides insurance in both of those spots. Again, Dom can play first base. If Pete goes down, Dom, your backup. He's insurance there. So with Cano and Dominic Smith, the Mets just have more and more above average bats that they can go to. And I look at their starting lineup right now, and in my opinion, there's going to be 8 above average bats in that lineup, excluding the catcher position. Now, you look at the 7 starters in the field outside of the catcher: Nimmo, Canha, Marte, Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Escobar. I think all of them are above average. Off the bench with JD Davis, Dominic Smith, and Robinson Cano, they're all above average options. You have Mark Vientos waiting in the wings. I don't want to trade from that, because really when I'm looking at this team right now, considering the concerns about the rotation, this is a team where I'm starting to think they're going to be more offensive oriented than, pitching oriented. But they have a great team defense. So I can see this team now with the athleticism across the board being able to help their pitchers defensively while putting up a ton of runs. We're seeing them do a great job, and it's only spring. I don't want to overreact to spring, but it's the way that the Mets are scoring runs in spring that has me intrigued. It's the fact that there's situational hitting happening. It's the fact that Starling Marte can get a hit. There could be a play at third base where he can end up advancing to second with his speed. This is what happened during this game on Sunday. He then stole third and was able to come around and score on, I believe, a ground ball to second off the bat of Lindor. So they are now able to use Marte's speed, to use the baseball IQ of veteran hitters like Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, Robinson Cano that they didn't have last year, to manufacture some extra runs. So instead of winning 4-3, maybe you're winning 6-3. And so maybe some of those pitching concerns aren't as glaring when you have a team that is able to score runs and also play great defense. I was looking at the 2017 opening day lineup for the New York Mets, which is 5 years ago. You had Jay Bruce in right. You had Curtis Granderson in center. You had Asdrubal Cabrera, Jose Reyes, and Neil Walker in the infield. This team now is so much more athletic than that team, way more capable of playing really quality defense. And that just shows up. It jumps off of your screen when you see Francisco Lindor at shortstop or Starling Marte in right field. The athleticism is just at a different level. And with that said, there was another report on Saturday that there was some within the Mets that viewed Travis Jankowski as a better fit on this roster than Dominic Smith. Whoever they are, I don't know what you're watching. Jankowski is not, he's a good athlete, but he has not been an above average hitter in his career. He's been well below average. And he's in a perfect situation right now. He's on a minor league deal. Jankowski will be seen from this year, but I don't want to see him on an opening day roster. I'd like to see him, maybe in May when you say, okay, we got a major leaguer who's coming up to fill in because Nimmo went down. We knew that was going to happen. Now you're going to put Dominic Smith in left maybe throughout the first 7 innings of the game. And now you have an option to go out there and, play some center or just sub in for Dom in left. That's fine, but you don't have to start him on the opening day roster. It's just more depth the Mets have, and that's a good thing. I don't think that the Mets should be moving Dom so that they could clear a spot on the opening day roster for Jankowski. Just doesn't make sense to me. Now, with that said, starter depth is a concern, and that's the other thing we learned from this trade, that the Mets are trying to explore that market. They apparently had some interest in Sean Manaea. He ended up going to the Padres, ironically enough. So that's off the table. You still have Frankie Montas, but I think he's going to cost a hell of a lot because there's an extra year of control there with Montas than you would have with Manaea or even Chris Bassett, the trade the Mets made earlier this offseason. So I just don't know if I see that as a reality. You look at the Reds, they have a couple arms out there with Luis Castillo and Tyler Mahle, but I just don't know if I see that come together either. I look at where the Mets are currently, and I would wait to react and see if something else happens before I make another move, because right now McGill slides into the rotation, and assuming this hamstring injury from Scherzer is not serious, which right now, again, it's day to day. They haven't even ruled him out for opening day just yet. He's going to throw a side on Tuesday, and then they will decide what they want to do with him. I look at the rotation and I say, right now, I am not overly concerned. I'm okay going into the first month of the season with Scherzer, Baskett, Carrasco, Walker, and McGill and seeing what happens. Because behind McGill, you still have Peterson, who is not a terrible option. Decent option. He could surprise us. And then you have Trevor Williams. And Trevor Williams right now, I think is going to be at the back of the Mets bullpen. As that long man is going to be that 8th man in the bullpen. But you saw what it did on Sunday. Again, it's spring training. It's the Marlins. But, he goes out. He pitched 3 scoreless innings. He did work around some walks, 2 walks, 4 hits, but did not allow a run. He threw 63 pitches, though, which is the thing that jumps out to me, and 45 of them being strikes. He pounds the zone. We saw that last year. I really like what I saw of Trevor Williams when he went into a Mets uniform. He's the last thing standing from the Pico Armstrong trade now that Javi Baez is a Tiger. And I look at Trevor Williams and I say, I can hang on to Dominic Smith and have Trevor Williams' depth, or I can trade Dominic Smith for a guy that's maybe only a slight upgrade from Trevor Williams when it comes to starter depth and Chris Paddack. It's not worth it. So right now, I think the Mets are in a decent shape. You can maybe go out still and add some pitcher on a minor league deal to give you some more depth when it comes to starters. If you really wanted to sign Johnny Cueto because Max Scherzer is going to miss a couple weeks to start the season, and you just decide, let's get a veteran in here, you could do that. But I don't think I am trading Dominic Smith to address my starter depth. If it's up to me, I would not go that route, because I think whatever depth starter you get, they're not going to give you the same impact. They're not going to move the needle more than Dominic Smith will in this lineup, because I still think that even if everything stands true with the way the roster is constructed, and let's just say the Mets have the healthiest season ever, which they won't, but let's just say that there's no significant injuries, I still see a very clear pathway to 400 plate appearances for Dominic Smith. And an injury here, an injury there, you could be pushing 550, 600 again. So I think the role's there for Dom. I think he's going to thrive in that role. I hang on to him at this point. And I also don't think that the starter depth is as grave of a concern as it's being made out to be. I like that Billy Eppler explores everything. He's going to continue to explore whatever is in front of him on the market, and that's a good thing. I just hope the Mets make a better trade than the one that was on the table here. And the fact that they did make this trade is great because at times in the past, when reports would start to come out about a deal like this, it felt imminent that it was going to happen. But luckily, they did not pull the trigger on that trade. They did, however, pull the trigger on another trade, which is a little bit surprising, sending Miguel Castro across town to the Yankees. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about the best tasting protein bar ever, which of course is Built Bar. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, low in fat, but they're high in protein and high in fiber. They also have the first ever protein infused marshmallow, the Puffs, which are fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're extremely delicious with great flavors like the cinnamon churro, the coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, also good, all coming covered in 100% real chocolate. Built is always coming out with limited time flavors, so make sure you check out their site often to see what's new. And once you're there, use the promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so let's finally talk about the trade that did take place this weekend. The Mets trade Miguel Castro to the New York Yankees for Joely Rodriguez. With the Yankees last year, Rodriguez pitched to a 2.84 ERA, but he started the year with Texas, and with the Rangers, he had a 5.93 ERA, so a tale of two seasons for him. Castro with 3.45 ERA last year, over 70 and a third pitch with the Mets. He had the better season. And you look at the advanced metrics, some point in favor of Castro, others point in favor of Rodriguez. One of them for Rodriguez is the chase rate in the 97th percentile last year. That means he has some really nasty pitches, particularly his changeup, which had a 41% whiff rate last year. He has a fastball that can touch in the mid to high 90s when it's really coming in there, but averages at 94. That's a fastball sinker. He's got a couple different options with that. He's a left-handed reliever, and basically that was the move here. You went from a righty to a lefty. Both guys have some high octane stuff. Castro throws a little bit harder, maybe jumps off the screen a little bit more, but I've seen some highlights now of Rodriguez, and he certainly pops as well. So, look, this was as simple as wanting another lefty, and that's the move they made. Now, one of the things I've talked about throughout this offseason is when we've been talking about the need for a left-handed reliever, I've said, I'm okay with righties that get lefties out, and Castro was that last year. You look at the splits for him last season, righties against Miguel Castro, a 180 average, 327 on base, 328 slugging. Lefties, a little bit of reverse splits here, 198 average, but a 313 on base, 270 slugging. Really good against lefties. I mean, really, you look at his numbers, they're pretty much on line with Rodriguez against lefties. Last year, Rodriguez, lefties hit 203 against him, 288 on base, 271 slugging. So the slugging was nearly identical. The average only a couple points off. He doesn't maybe walk as many lefties, but again, there's not a drastic difference there. Right-handers against Rodriguez last year teed off, 339 average, 380 on base, 446 slugging. So with that said, I do understand Mets fans that don't agree with this trade because Castro has a lot of promise. And then there was, when the trade first was made, this idea that, well, okay, the Mets got a guy with more control. But apparently, according to Joel Sherman, the contract that Rodriguez signed with the Yankees allows him to be a free agent again after this season. So really, the money is almost identical. The control is almost identical, assuming that Rodriguez does become that free agent. So it's a weird swap. It's hard for me to have a really heated opinion either way on it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Miguel Castro. I thought the numbers did drop off. The stuff did drop off after the sticky substance ban last year. The first couple weeks of the season, he looked unhittable. When that happened, it seemed like he did take a little bit of a step back, but still ended up being really effective. Still took the ball a ton for the Mets last year. Had a really good season. So when I first saw the trade, I was like, I don't really get that. I don't really understand what they're going with here, other than just getting another lefty. But I'm not mad at it either. I'm just kind of indifferent on it. And for whatever reason, the Mets value Rodriguez a little bit more, and the Yankees, with all the lefties they have, that they wanted Castro in their pen. And I don't think it's really going to change the fortune of the Mets season too much either way. You look at the way the bullpen is shaping up right now, they still have a lot of really good right-handed options. You have Edwin Diaz, Trevor May, and Adam Ottavino likely to take over the late inning responsibilities. You have Seth Lugo, who certainly could revert back to 2019 form and be another good late inning reliever for the Mets. Drew Smith had a really nice season last year. From the left side, now you have Rodriguez and Chasen Shreve, I believe, will make the team. He once again had another scoreless outing on Sunday, striking out 2 and walking 1 in an inning of work. He's looked really great, so I don't think that this really affects his standing on the roster, particularly with a 28-man opening day roster. The expanded roster is going through April, and then they will end, I believe, on May 1st. They'll go back to 26. You would imagine the Mets will probably carry 10 pitchers, I would think, unless they really wanted to force a Jankowski on the roster as another outfielder, if they wanted a third catcher and they wanted to bring up, Patrick Mazeika. They could do a couple of things here with that or with those extra 2 spots, but I'd imagine they'll simply go with more pitching. I already mentioned 7 names there with Diaz, May, Ottavino, Lugo, Smith, Rodriguez, and Shreve. Trevor Williams will be on this team as well as the long man, as I talked about earlier. Then you have Sean Reed-Foley. You have Jake Reed as other options who have yet to be sent down to the minors. I could imagine both of them making the team as well. And I guess David Peterson could also be an additional option if the Mets wanted another long man for the first month of that season. They could keep Peterson aboard with the big league club for a little bit before sending him down to Syracuse. Bottom line, I think the Mets are in good shape. And I don't imagine that they have to make another move. But also Billy Eppler will remain on the phones and will continue to monitor everything. And as he said in the past, one of the luxuries of working for Steve Cohen is that Steve wants him to bring him any opportunity. He wants those opportunities presented in front of him, and then they're going to make the best decision for the franchise. And when it comes to the decisions they made this weekend, while I don't necessarily love either of the moves they were trying to make, I certainly hated the original trade that they were going to make, the Chris Paddack, Dominic Smith, Hosmer deal. And I just don't feel bad at all that that thing did not go through. And then, the trade they made on Sunday is one that I don't know. If I would have made that deal, but I'm not mad at it either. I think that Rodriguez has the chance to maybe be maximized even further with the Mets. And it just gives you another left-handed option. And considering their lack of depth when it came to left-handed relievers, maybe it is worth it just for that entirely, because I don't really love Alex Claudio as an option. There really just isn't much else in the Mets system. They have some other options with Yenzi Diaz and Jose Budo on the 40-man roster when it comes to the right side. So maybe because of that, they felt that it was worth it to just get another lefty, and you can't have enough of that. So that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I want to break down what we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the week heading into opening day. On tomorrow's show, we have a full crossover with the entire NL East. You got the host of Locked On Marlins, Locked On Phillies, Locked On Braves, Locked On Nationals, and myself. I guided that conversation. We talked for about 40 minutes. That's going to be a nice long show for you, previewing the NL East. And I will also be recording a YouTube exclusive tomorrow. I just want to talk DHs for like 10 minutes, just who's the best DH in the National League East. So that's going to be on YouTube on Wednesday. We are going to change things up. I have been breaking down the best infield in the division, the best outfield, the best rotation. And in all of those rankings, it was always Mets and Braves at the top. So I'm sorry to the Phillies. I'm sorry to the Nationals. I'm sorry to the Marlins. Here's what we're going to do. On Wednesday's show, I'm just going to do straight who's the better team, Mets, Braves, on paper going into the season. There I will break down the bullpens. I'll break down the benches, everything we haven't covered, and reiterate what we have already covered. And I'll give you my final prediction going into the year of who will win this division. Then on Thursday, we got opening day. That's going to be all. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan, but we call him Sully. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball, and also to take a look back at the past. If you want to follow Locked On MLB, you can wherever you get podcasts.